Hi, and welcome back to Heimler's History U.S. Government Edition. In the last video, we talked about how people form their political opinions, and in this video, we're going to see how researchers measure that public opinion through surveys and polls. And you've probably seen the results of some of these polls on the internet or on television. Back in 2007, the New York Times published a survey whose results said that there are more women now living without a husband than are living with one. That's right, ladies, you get your independence. You throw off that patriarchy. What's that? The New York Times admitted 4 weeks later that they fudged the results of that survey because they included 15 to 17-year-old girls as those who lived without husbands? Ah, man, I guess the patriarchy is still patriarching. I mean, that is an example of a fundamentally untrustworthy and manipulative poll. So can we trust the polls that we see today? Well, that's what this video is about. So let's get to it. So we're going to do three things in this video. First, I'm going to explain how researchers measure public opinion. Second, I'm going to tell you all the problems that come with those measurements. And then third, we're going to try to figure out, can we trust them? Okay, first, how do researchers measure public opinion? Well, the most popular method of gathering information about public opinion is through mass surveys. And the point of a mass survey is to measure what a particular population thinks about a certain matter by asking them questions. Now, obviously, if a researcher wants to know what Americans think about terrorism, for example, it would take way too long to track down every American and ask them their opinion. So in order for the results of a mass survey to be timely and manageable, then researchers go and find what's called a sample. And a sample can range from a few hundred people to a few thousand people. And supposing that sample of people is a good representative of the larger population, then the answers that those people give to the questions can then be generalized to the larger population. Now you can imagine it's not a given that what a few thousand people think is an exact representation of what everybody thinks. And therefore, researchers acknowledge the possibility of sampling error. And generally speaking, the larger the sample, the smaller the error. And the smaller the sample, the larger the error. Okay, that's the method researchers use by and large to measure public opinion. And all that sounds pretty straightforward. Find yourself a good sample of people, ask them some questions on what they think, and then boom, you got yourself some useful data. But unfortunately, it's not that clean. So let's move to our second point and talk about the problems that come with measuring public opinion. Problem number one, finding a truly representative sample. I mean, think about it. It's not that easy to find a representative sample of a few thousand people that actually genuinely represents all the people. For example, when researchers reach out through the phone to get people to participate in their surveys, 90% of people don't answer, or if they do answer, refuse to participate. But okay, so what? Maybe all you need is that 10%. But is that truly a representative sample? I mean, think about it. Maybe those 10% of people all have something in common that would make them say yes to a survey. And if they have that thing that they all have in common, does that mean they're truly representing everybody in that population? So, I mean, you can see it can get really tricky. Problem number two, the wording of questions can lead to problematic results. For example, a 1937 Gallup poll asked the following question: would you vote for a woman for president if she were qualified in every other way? If she were qualified in every other way. Hey, it's 1937. We know a woman can't be president, but suppose she wasn't a woman and was a man instead. Would you vote for her? If the Gallup organization really wants to know what they think about people voting for a woman, then the wording of that question fundamentally undermines that goal. Or take another example. In 2010, a Harris poll revealed that 25% of Republicans believed that Barack Obama was the Antichrist. A quarter of Republicans believe that Barack Obama is the Antichrist. 25% is not a small number, but when you look at the question, the results become a little more understandable. Many people believe that Barack Obama is the Antichrist. Do you agree? That is a terrible question intended to get a sensational result. Okay, problem number three, unreliable respondents. I don't think it'll surprise you to know that many people are reluctant to reveal their true opinions on a survey. It's been shown by people who study these things that respondents often give an answer that is socially acceptable or an answer they think that the researcher wants to hear. And this phenomenon is called the social desirability bias. And this just says people are less likely to admit to opinions that are socially undesirable. For example, suppose a researcher approached one of my Southern brethren to ask him a few questions. And as the researcher approaches this man, he's got a Confederate flag planted in his truck bed, and he's got the following bumper stickers, which I confess are real and I have seen with my own eyes here in my fair state of Georgia. Number one, I'd rather be shooting Yankees, and number two, vote for the right guy. the white guy. Now suppose the researcher approached this gentleman and asked him a simple question. Are you a racist? The presence of the social desirability bias says that his response would be, no. So, all that to say, many people say what they think the researcher wants to hear or what would be socially acceptable. It's also been shown by the people who study these things that people will make up answers just to avoid the embarrassing scenario of not having an answer. And I understand that, like no one wants to look like a fool. Also, people can have opinions even if they're not based in reality. For example, a 2015 poll on Obamacare asked whether the respondent thought spending on Obamacare was greater or less than what Obama promised in 2010. 42% said spending was higher than promised, 40% said they didn't know, 5% said that spending was less than promised. Now, as it turned out, the 5% were correct. Obamacare ended up costing less by 2015 than was promised in 2010. But how do we explain the results of that poll? Well, because of some other questions the pollsters asked, we know who these people were, roughly, who responded this way. The 42% who said that spending was higher than promised were generally Republicans. The 40% who said they didn't know were generally Democrats. And the 5% who got it right were both Republicans and Democrats who actually knew what they were talking about. So we come to our third point now. Given all of that we just said, can we trust these polls? I say yes, but it is a qualified yes. I think it's good to trust polls provisionally just as long as you know all the ways that those results can go wrong. Researchers who are worthy of the name work very hard to minimize error. Researchers who are not worthy of the name work very hard to manipulate people to get the results from their surveys that they want to get. So my admonition when it comes to polls is let the polls be the beginning of your search for truth and not the end. I'll see you next time. You know, I think at the end of a video like this, it would be very socially undesirable for you not to subscribe. I mean, everyone's doing it. And there's some more videos right over there that YouTube thinks you're gonna love. And you know what? I think you will too. And if you found this video helpful, then click that like button and help it spread. All right, I'll see you on the flip-flop.